Everybody, welcome to outdoor edition of Yerushalmi Chagigah, and we are up to Daf Chaf Aleph. Let's see. We're up to 5 lines down towards the end of the line. Rabun Barchia Boy, Kaimitz Mao Sheyekrev B'Shnei Kalim. You bring a kaimitz in 2 separate kalim. Right? Normally, you bring a kaimitz, it's all brought off one kli. Can you split it into 2? Or do we say maybe it's like dam, and dam it can't be mikadosh lechatzor, and you can't bring dam into 2 kalim. You can't bring dam. You can't separate the dam to 2 separate kalim. Is it the same thing? Does it apply to a kmitza? So heter Reb Chanan, so fragt Reb Chanan, we learned a kli mitzaref. Kli is mitzaref. We just had this yesterday. In Temesh Kametz Karev B'Shnei Kalim, V'Leida Mila Tanina Kli mitzaref. What are you telling me the kli is mitzaref for? If it can be brought in 2 different kalim, then they're never combined. Right? They're never halachically combined, because since you bring them 2 separate kalim, why would they be mitzaref? Amar Reb Loza Drumaya Loikin of Rabbi Yossi Bereb Zmina B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan Pnima Amar Shior Menachas B'Chabrim Es Atzma and Lo Pnei Is Koku Lekalyan V'Hochan Shen Is Koku Lekalyan. Right. It's at the end of the day, we said yesterday, one of the things that we said is that even if right now they don't need the kli, we had said yesterday that since at one point they were in the same kli, they required a kli, so they're mitzaref, even though now they don't need a kli. So we say the same thing about a kamitza. The kamitza, at that point of the kamitza, it needs to be in one kli. And it was separated now, but it needs to be in one kli. So therefore, we should say the same thing over here. It should be mitzaref. Amr Masni B'chisos Victoria's Lavonu Gechon Lo become a Kelm and Craven, but Hakli Mitzaref. Hakli Mitzaref. What difference does it make? How many different Kalim you can bring it in? Gemara says. At the end of the day, the tziruf, the kli's mitzaref, regardless of the fact that they can be brought in separate, in separate kalim. And the same would apply by kaimitz, even though you're right, you can bring it in shnei kalim, but at the end of the day, if they're as long as they're in one kli at the time, they're mitzaref. Kahana shoal Rabban and the Tamon mincha chaluka bebisa. So you have a mincha split. It's a bisa, is this a cup or begasa here. It's a kli that they would put the mincha in. So you have it in 2 areas in the same pan. And nitmizu. So one becomes tame. So they actually, this was a question. So yes, nitmizu. Amalei said to them, yep, nitmizu. So if the one on this side becomes tame, then the one on this side also becomes tame. Fragt v'kafta tuma. What happened? The tuma jumped. Amalei, yeah. V'kafta tuma jumps. I feel like there's been time. Let's say you have a third kamitza that's over here. So, I'm sorry, third mincha. So you have a third mincha that's over here in between them. So you have one here. These are from the same mincha. Then you have in the middle, you have another one. What about that case where it's mafsik? Amalei filah cheres ben tam. Yeah, it would still jump from one to the other one, and chiddush is the one in the middle won't become tame. Kaimitz mizulazu. Can you take kamitza from one onto the other? So let's say again, you have the 2 minchas, and you have to take a kamitza off each one of them. Can you take from one to the other? Amalei, listen, Shmuel Shemana, we didn't hear clear psak for this specific question. But Mishnah Shni went to Mishnah. Maybe we can get an answer from this Mishnah that we know. We learned you have 2 menachas that were not yet kaimitz were not yet removed from them. And this arva zubazu. Now these 2 menachas got mixed up with each other. And miyacha likmoitz mizuba fniyatzo. It's enough that he can take. There's enough in each of these. The mixture, right? So you have 2 separate piles in one container. So you can go from one and take. There's enough to take off from this from this one a kamitza, enough from this one a kamitza. Ksheris. So then the kasha him lav. Otherwise, but there's not enough of a shit to take a kamitza from each one. Them sulas. So the shirayim of the kamitza, right? You take off the kamitza. The rest that's left over is shirayim, but that's mafsik between that and the other one. So what would it help to take off of each one? In other words, you have two minchas here, so you have to take off of each one. So you take one kamitza, you assume between the two kamitzas, take one from this pile, one from that pile. So between the two of them, you got both minachas, but they're not together. They're supposed to be together by the kamitzas, and they aren't they mafsik by their own shirayim. So also Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, Rabbi Yosef, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, kaimitz. And tak, so we see from over there, I'm sorry, so we see from over there that taka kaimitz mizu alzu, and that's what we're saying now. Rabbi Yaakov says taka, you see Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yosef, Hashem Rabbi Yochanan, kaimitz mizu alzu taka. And nitmezu, however, ha'imtsois loy nitmis. So according to Rabbi Yaakov, he says the middle one does not become tamei. You want to understand how can that be? Loy kain tani mulon kaf achas shehi oisa masha b'toicha achas. It all becomes one. So why is the third one not becoming tamei? They're all in the same pot. It's only it only is mitzvah for what's fit for it, and since that third mincha didn't belong there, it's not fit for it. The tuma jumps over it. Rab Shimon ben Lakish boy, what about tzrid shel menachas? If you have a tzrid, there's a clump, so you have the mincha is meant to be mincha is meant to be mixed with oil. And you have a area of the mincha where the oil didn't get this. Instead, you're left with this clump. Mahu sheyasa minyan. Does it become a rishon? Does it becomes tamei? Become a rishon? Do we count rishon sheni? Or does it just become puzzle? Heisiv Reb Lezev Oksiv Mikoloichel Sheyochel Sheyavelov Mayim Yitma Eshe Tomase de Mayim Ois Minyan Eshe Tomase de Mayim Ein Ois Minyan. So the way it works is something that becomes tamei through Mayim, knows becomes Hochshel Kabel Tuma through Mayim, that your minor rishon sheni l'tuma. Something that's not something that does not become tamei through water, it just becomes puzzle. Hey, Sev Rabbi Yosi, Hare Nivlas Oif HaTohar, Hare Himetama Thomas Oichlem, Beloy Hechshav Loitum. We know there's a concept of Nivlas Oif Tahar, so somebody swallows an Oif Tahar, an Avela of an Oif Tahar, so didn't have a kosher shchita, he becomes Tameh. Now, how does he become Tameh if it was never Hochshel Kabel Tumah? So the Gemara says, well, that in other words, you see from here that mime is not the deciding factor here. You see, the nivla sefer even though it never touched any water, it causes tumah, not just pasless. So Gemara says none of that's different because sefer tama is tumah chamura. Since at the end it's going to end up having a tumah chamura because it's metama begadim as well. Whatever the guy's wearing also becomes tameh when he swallows this oif this nivla sefer. So that because that's the case, so even without water, it could your minor rishon sheni. Okay, so my kidain. So what's the din in our case with the tzrid shel mincha? What do we do with that? So mikoloichel sheyochel shetumas mishamoichel loisaminyan. Veshein tumas mishamoichel ein oisaminyan. Over here. So he says, well, it depends. If the tum is also, because now it's hochshel kabel tum because it's an eichel, so then it's oisaminyan. You would count rishon sheni, etc. However, this is something called chibas hakodesh, right? The mincha is not necessarily because it's food as it becomes susceptible to tumah. It becomes susceptible to tumah because it becomes important because it's kodesh, right? You're going to be makrivit. So therefore, only things that are because of eichel that are susceptible to tumah because they have a din of eichel, those are those you will count in rishon sheni. But if it becomes tumah only because of chibas hakodesh, that's what's causing the tumah. You don't count. You're not moin rishon sheni. Fine. Somebody eats a Rabbi said, maybe quote out lacha. If a person eats a shlishi b'truma, even though Tuma doesn't go more than a shlishi. So if a guy eats a shlishi, still he can't make a revi, but still nifsal go from truma. He can't eat truma anymore till it becomes tar. Mashmum bar Yitzchak boy ma Rabbi Eliezer is Rabbi going to Rabbi Eliezer. The thing Tama will learn over there oichel rishon. Rabbi Eliezer holds now always a concept. If someone touches a rishon, he becomes a sheni, but not by oichel. By oichel, Rabbi Eliezer says oichel rishon becomes a rishon. Oichel sheni becomes a sheni. Oichel shlishi becomes a shlishi. So it seems to be that being the case, now as a shlishi, he's going to be metama the truma, and therefore he can't eat truma. He's also a truma. So the Gemara says, no, it's not just Rabbi Eliezer. Actually, directly, everybody agrees to this. Hey, Badal Mina Truma. The Chamed Gzeira, that if you ate Shlishi, and you can't be Matama the Truma, but we don't want you to hang around Truma. So therefore, we said, do not eat Truma. It's Gzeira Drabana. So Frei Gemara, what about, do we have the same thing by Maisa? Somebody who eats oichel sheni. Now again, sheni, Maisa is a madrega above truma. So if he eats sheni, so b'maisa nifsal gufim lochel b'maisa, just like we said by truma if he eats shlishi. So in Shmina Ado, we can answer this from Oveh v'chom oisrim b'maisa. Amar Reb Shmuel b'shem Reb Zeiru ma v'chom oisrim b'maisa. What does that mean? They ask in maisa nifsal gufim milechel b'maisa anachanami. So he would not be allowed to eat Maisa if he ate a sheni, even though again sheni does not cause tuma by Maisa. Maisa is done of chulin, but the Chamin Exeru, we want you to stay away from Maisa.